just like starts like without any intro or anything. Hey everybody, it's Corran on the horn with Cliff and Norm. Another one of these episodes where we talk with the intern. We have too many nicknames or titles or whatever. Well, especially you do, because you're Brenderlin and you're Cliff and you're Matt Thornton and you're the intern.
Yeah. Sometimes people will just call me the Major. Also, the
Major.
The smoking Gungan usually refers to me as the Major. But yeah, here we are. You have a few yourself. You're Corran.
Yes.
Also Corran Antilles, if I recall a previous episode, where you learned that part of your backstory. Actually, maybe that's it. Corran and Kendall. Yeah. That's mainly how I know you as.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Realistically, I do use the name Ogden Kendrick in my RPG settings, but that's not necessarily on the internet as much. But and I'm also which one am I? Am I Cliff or Norm?
I think decided that you're Norm fiction. And I'm Cliff, just because Cliff is played by Brent Derlin. So, yeah.
Which I did mean to watch some Cheers this month and did not. So maybe I'll rectify that in the future. So we did want to talk a little bit about the end of the Acolyte.
Yeah, there's a lot of Star Wars stuff that's happened in the past month.
Thing. Yeah. So where I'm at with the Acolyte, I'm just going to jump in, and you can tell me I'm right or wrong.
Yeah, just for posterity, anyone who's listening after the fact, we discussed the first half before, on the last episode, and I guess if you were listening after the fact, you would know that. Never mind. Yeah, now it's done, and yes, Kendall, where are you with the Acolyte?
So I think that, first of all, and I did not rewatch it. I only watched it the first time around, and don't really see myself necessarily rewatching it. I do ultimately think it was one of the weaker installments of the Disney Plus and everything. I think it will watch better as a whole, and I do think kind of now that going back and rewatching it and just sort of being able to enjoy it for what it is, as opposed to like trying to figure out the mystery or trying to figure out where they're going with the show, probably would make it a little bit more enjoyable. Ultimately, I think that the mystery was kind of left some to be desired. I don't love what it had to say about the Jedi kind of fundamentally being problemy, but I also I think now that I thought about it more, and it's like, this isn't, because I was thinking this was the last High Republic story, or this was the story that was going to represent the tail end of the High Republic. And so
I think that story is the Phantom Menace.
Well, see, no, I'm going the other direction, where I think that this is the story that introduces those first cracks in the Jedi and moves us from the High Republic era, where generally it was where things were a little bit more black and white, and the Jedi were generally considered to be like, these are the good guys, to maybe there are problems here fundamentally with the system, and then eventually leading to the rise of the Empire and all that stuff.
Right.
And so I think, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think for me, I don't think it certainly wasn't my least favorite Disney Plus show. I enjoyed, and there's a lot of things I really liked about it. I think at the end of the day, it was a miss. But I think I liked it better than the Book of Boba Fett, or probably it's probably about even with Kenobi for me. That and the last season of The Mandalorian, I think I also did not enjoy. But again, with all of those, there's things that I like about all of them, right? I think it's all Star Wars, right? But yeah, I think some of what we talked about on the last episode, I think did hold up to be true, which is that just the pacing of the whole season, I think, hurt it. I mean, I still don't know if I'm correct in my assessment that they like basically made a 6-episode show and then decided to stretch it out into 8 episodes. Because it definitely seems like that's what they did, because there's a lot of like episodes where it sort of ends where it feels like a halfway point in an episode, and that the flashbacks to both flashback episodes feel like that they could have been and probably were originally just one episode that was the flashback. And
see, I don't agree. I don't agree with that. I think that the flashbacks should have been spread out over the whole series. I don't think that putting them together would have worked, because then you wouldn't have had the sort of like unreliable narrator isn't exactly the thing, but like you would have lost kind of the mystery that was a big part of the show.
I think if we just waited until the very end, like basically not have the first flashback episode and just have all of it be in the place where they dropped the second one. You know, that's kind of like takes a break from everything and like fills you in on what actually happened. But you know, I also very much could be wrong about that, because that's based on like both of them having the same director, and those are the only 2 episodes they directed. Similarly with the episodes where it felt like it ended kind of halfway through an episode, that episode and the following episode had the same director as well. So that's what told me that they may have ended up splitting them. But it also just could be a like practical consideration of like this was the only flashback episode, so that was the only time they had those characters in all of those characters in those at that makeup, you know, the young makeup basically. And where they
I will say that I thought I will say that I thought that the second flashback episode was not different enough. Like there was a little bit more reused footage and other stuff that it wasn't different enough. The story was, you know, we got a little bit more, but there was still some kind of head scratching.
We got scenes that we didn't see before. Like it kind of, and it's not so much that we saw the same scene from a different angle. Like I feel like they did not really sell the Rashomon aspect of it, you know, where you're getting different perspectives on the same events. They just kind of showed the same events happening the exact same way, and then also some other events that we didn't really see to add, that we didn't have the context for in the first one.
Yeah, it's like so we didn't have it's like we were seeing it from different characters' perspectives, but there wasn't there was additional context, but it wasn't like those characters were unreliable narrators. Those characters were basically telling the truth. Now, I will say, initially. Oh, sorry, go ahead. So I will say initially,
we're probably transitioning to the same place. Like, what are the things that we did like about it?
Yeah. I will say that initially, I didn't like the death of Soul. But then I thought about it more, and I actually do think that it's kind of interesting that he did not take responsibility.
Yeah.
And that you actually did have like this in most things, you know, she would have heard the truth, and it would have been hard, but she would have overcome it or whatever. She would have eventually forgiven him, but in this case she did not. And then
part it's because he went so long without ever telling her. Like, I think that if he had told her when he was still her master, she would have taken it differently than when she finds out from her sister, who she thought was dead. Exactly. And
he just kept saying, "I did what I thought was right." he didn't say, I should have told you. Now I know I was wrong. I given the information I had at the time, I did my best, but that wasn't good enough, or something like that. And then we did get a lightsaber bleeding, which is so cool.
Yeah, that was cool. Like, I think generally the visual aspect of the show, I thought was like they did a really good job with. I think everything looked good, and especially like the fight choreography, like, was a kind of a departure from Star Wars, at least the way I saw it. Like, there was a lot of like kind of wuxia influence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't lean super heavy on it. I think because but you could see that there, and I think that is a sort of style that actually blends very well with Star Wars because they're using the Force, and so like they can float and do like stuff like that they would do in those kind of movies.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing that I want to see more of. If there's anything from this show that I want to see more of, it's that style, and that just experimenting with different martial arts styles in the incorporating in there. Because I mean, when The Force Awakens came out and people were too busy, I think, overanalyzing and complaining about things with Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker to really have a meaningful discussion about this. But when The Force Awakens came out, a lot of people talked about how Kylo Ren's duel with Rey felt more like a European, like, knights fighting each other, with the big heavy swords,
the great swords,
as opposed to other, as opposed to other versions of, as opposed to how other fights looked in different eras of Star Wars. And this was like very much the epitome of the like samurai style fighting and Eastern martial arts and everything, which fits perfectly with the High Republic being, a work that takes place way before everything else. It's got this, foundational historical feel to it. And I really,
a time when like the Jedi have kind of more pizzazz, right? Like they're wearing brighter colors. They're wearing gold, and like they will have sort of, the Jedi have more swag in this era than the Jedi we're used to seeing.
Yeah. And but unfortunately, I just, and maybe I do need to just rewatch it. There was a lot, especially in the finale, where I was taken out of the experience because I was overthinking it, or because I was worried about, whether I was right or wrong about my predictions, and what does this mean for the overall lore. I actually,
it's funny you say that, because I feel like the experience you're describing is exactly why most people didn't like The Last Jedi, but that's a discussion for a different time, I guess.
Well, and The Last Jedi is a movie that the very first time I watched it, although I don't agree with like that surface level statement, the very first time I watched it, it rubbed me the wrong way a little bit because the turn with Poe, didn't quite either I didn't get it, or it wasn't communicated well, and Holdo as a character didn't totally work on the first viewing. And then I went back on the second viewing, kind of knowing the context and knowing where it was going, and enjoyed it 100 times more. With The Last Jedi, I think it's kind of funny because going into The Last Jedi, I was very worried that Mark Hamill was not going to be Luke Skywalker. That he just was, because honestly, Force Awakens, I didn't really believe Carrie Fisher as Leia, and I felt like Harrison Ford phoned it in. But I mean,
too, but Harrison Ford has always phoned in Star Wars.
Well,
he just is a very charismatic person, so like it works.
Well, and that's why my two favorite Han Solos are Alden Ehrenreich and Mark Thompson, the guy that does the audiobooks.
Well, that is a take.
Yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is. But yes, no, you're right. But I think that but Luke Skywalker he is not just Mark Hamill. He is a very specific character. And like even just like the look and everything, and I thought that Last Jedi nailed it perfectly. Which is why it's bizarre to me that people don't see that he was playing the anyway. But with Acolyte, there were some moments where I was a little bit taken out of it, and so then because of that, I wasn't able to enjoy like the lightsaber bleeding as much as I wish that I would have, because I was so worried about, well, what does this say about the lore? What does this say about the? And I mean, I kind of am one of those people who doesn't love that Ki-Adi-Mundi is 130 years old now, and what that says about his species and all that. You know, I do get kind of hung up on some of that stuff. Actually, probably more than the overall, because if you fundamentally, and I want to make it clear, I don't think that the Acolyte changed Star Wars lore in a meaningful way. It certainly did, and to the extent that it may have clarified how things work in canon, it didn't. I don't think it contradicted anything. I just want to like anybody that says that is
like it didn't need
understand.
to be Ki-Adi-Mundi. I don't know that I'm not sure that it adds anything. Maybe they're going to do something with Ki-Adi-Mundi in the future in the like 100 years between. But
but anyway, I want to
anyway.
But I will say I don't love seeing Darth Plagueis there. Because that means that Darth Plagueis is really freaking old. Because not only do we see Darth Plagueis there, but he's already a grown-up Darth Plagueis. Like it's not like we're seeing young Darth Plagueis there.
Well, here's something. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. But the whole thing with Darth Plagueis is that he can keep people from dying.
Yeah.
So actually it makes sense. He could be 1,000 years old. Like he's not going to die unless he gets the wrong apprentice who then kills him in his sleep.
Right?
Because that's what ends up happening. Right. If I recall correctly, that's what he is functionally immortal. And he's so taken with his own power that he does not sense that his apprentice who learned everything from him is like planning to do what apprentices always do. Like,
yeah,
I don't understand how like any Sith Lord ever gets like killed by their apprentice, because like, what did you do to your master? Like, because
every single one of them from Darth Bane on thinks that they're going to be the one that that breaks the cycle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also they're going to be, they all try to break the rule of two. And they all do everything.
Always. There's never it's more of a suggestion. It's it's a rule of two. It's me and this one. The other one's not, he's not going to last. Don't worry. It's going to be two eventually. Like, we're going to get rid of that one.
Yeah.
Once we get rid of that one, then you're my real one. Although, to be honest, I don't know that Dooku ever saw Asajj as like an actual apprentice. He like gave her enough training that gave her the training she needed to be a useful tool, like to be an assassin, as it says in her lore box, right? But I don't think he ever really saw her as like, you are going to be my apprentice when I beat Sidious and take over the galaxy or whatever. Right. Yeah, I do. I feel like there's room to like explore kind of more what Dooku's actual motivations were, because I think there's an interesting theory or an interesting story you could tell where like Dooku, the tragedy of Dooku is that he always wants to destroy the Sith. And he sort of, much like his character from Lord of the Rings, thinks that the best way to destroy them is by joining them, and then eventually, like once you've helped them take over the world, then you take them out. And because he also has a thing against the Jedi, and he also wants to take them out, and so I could see him like he sort of sees the problems with the Jedi that I think are there. I think are there even before this show.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can see the way the Jedi are portrayed in the prequels, and which was like often a criticism of the prequels that I remember. Nowadays, everyone loves the prequels, which is all so weird to me because for most of my life, that the
Not
prequels have
everyone
existed.
loves the prequels.
There
still are people who are, but
who are holdouts. But by and large,
but
I
a lot
think
of
the
people
consensus in the Star Wars community, at least our corner of the Star Wars community, is people love the prequels, even if they were one of the haters like 10 years ago,
Mhm.
right? But I think that
Right.
like that was a common criticism of the prequels 10 years ago when people had oh, we thought the Jedi were the guardians of peace and justice, but it turns out they're all like whatever. But I think that the truth is like the Jedi have always been flawed, and the Jedi are always kind of like willing to bend the rules and lie. I mean, like the whole like Obi-Wan lies to Luke the entire time that he's alive. He doesn't tell him the truth until after he's a Force ghost, right?
Mhm.
And he has a reason for doing that, the same way that Sol had a reason for doing what he did. And I think it worked out, but it almost didn't, And I think Obi-Wan probably would have a pretty similar mentality to Sol about like whether he fucked up training Anakin. I think he would probably not, unless I'm forgetting something in like the show or later where he kind of expresses regrets. He sort of like kind of puts it all on on Anakin, and when like Filoni has said, and like I'm presumably from like his conversations with George, that like the tragedy of like the duel of the fates, right? In the duel in Phantom Menace, is that Qui-Gon would have been the perfect person to train Anakin because he's sort of this. He sees what's wrong with the Order, but he still wants to be a part of it, right? He was Dooku's apprentice. And like Dooku says this in Attack of the Clones, that he like knew the problems with the Senate and the Republic, and that the Jedi Order was like kind of too wrapped up in that to like see them. And that's why he wasn't on the council, right? Because he refused to like kind of play by the rules, but he also didn't want to like separate himself from it the way that like Dooku did.
Well, I'm reading Master and Apprentice, and they did just offer Qui-Gon a spot on the council. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, whether he takes it or not.
Spoiler: he does. Well, actually, I don't know. Was he on the council at a certain point and got kicked off? I'm not sure. That's one that I've been meaning to read, because Qui-Gon is one of my favorite characters in Star Wars that I think is like very underrated.
Well, the reason that I wanted to read it is because I was thinking, I'm actually at this point, I've read enough stories about Jedi that screw up and their origins and how it leads to their downfall. And I know that eventually Obi-Wan makes some mistakes that are pretty bad, but at the end of the day, and especially like after the prequels, like I honestly I would put most of the, I mean, we all have problems. And while the Jedi has problems and not everybody, I kind of, my headcanon is that no matter what, Anakin was going to fall to the dark side. Nobody could have stopped him. I'll talk about that more in a second, but basically I wanted to read a story about, because it's about, it's from the point of view mostly of Obi-Wan as a Padawan. And I wanted to know the story of somebody who ends up being a successful Jedi, what that looks like. Because I've always thought of Obi-Wan as the platonic ideal Jedi. Like, he's the example of a Jedi.
I remember that was a Reddit thread a few months ago about like who was the quintessential Jedi in Star Wars, and I think it is Obi-Wan, and I think it's for kind of, I think both for good and for bad. I think he expresses everything that's great about the Jedi and like what they're all about, and also their flaws, and like sort of because he's not a perfect character. But he's not, and I think that's an important distinction. Like he like the Jedi might make mistakes and might do things that aren't like the best choice, but that's not the same as being evil. Like the Sith, are
Right.
evil.
Right.
Anyway,
It's almost like politics where there's two sides. There's one side that's trying their best to make things perfect and maybe isn't doing the best job of it, and then there's another side that actually wants to make things worse. I'll let you guys guess which side I'm referring to. But it's like, yeah, so it's like, but yeah, because that's actually a big thing for me about Revenge of the Sith is if you watch Revenge of the Sith and you see the events that lead to Anakin's fall, and if you ask yourself, well, like what would he have done differently if Yoda had said, embrace your, fight, if Yoda had told him to try to fight against his visions, or what would he have done differently if Mace had taken him with him? Like, it's like, this is inevitable. Now, granted, obviously Qui-Gon maybe would have trained him differently and would have raised him differently, and he'd have been in a different place. But at the same time, like, I think that it's very important to me that Anakin's fall is inevitable, and at the end of the day, if anyone's to blame, he's the one that's to blame. I think that's him. If you're going to blame anyone, he also is a tragic figure. And also the Jedi are terrible, but like, there are stories, like in like, I think a lot about Nija Halcyon, Corran Horn's grandfather from Legends. Okay. Mostly because they hadn't established the lore that Jedi can't get married, but Nija Halcyon had a wife.
Right.
And obviously had a kid who then had another kid, and who was Corran Horn. And so he was able to, they were able to deal with it. And like, there's like a moment there's a couple moments in Revenge of the Sith where, where Obi-Wan is like, oh, Padme, you're the father, aren't you? Oh, okay. And it's like, well, how do we deal with that? And it's like, he could have just dealt with it. Like, these things are not that important. But
well, and there's also the implication that, like, because Obi-Wan knew right away that Anakin was the father, means that, like, I think that he kind of knew about Anakin and Padme already, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he may not have known, like, acknowledged it, but he knew.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like, I kind of feel like it's almost like a don't ask, don't tell sort of thing.
Right.
Where, like, Jedi, and actually that's the part of the show that I think is really interesting, is like at the very end when Venestra is talking to that senator about his problems with the Jedi and why they need oversight, is because they pretend to control the uncontrollable. And she says, we don't control the Force. He said, no, I'm not talking about the Force. I'm talking about your emotions. You guys pretend like you have them all under control and you're able to repress them, but that's you're actually, and I think that's sort of the story of the show, is like, you see Soul, he is acting out of his emotions the entire time, but he's able to rationalize it that that's not what he's doing. Like, that's why he goes after Osha in the beginning, because he has a strong sense that he needs to, and maybe it's because, he was taken from his family, and like, there's a whole cycle of that goes with seeing the Jedi.
I still want to see, and I think we talked about this last episode, I still want to see somebody somebody get taken from their family as a 4-year-old or whatever age, to go become a Jedi and never see their family again, and to see what that looks like when it goes well. Because Obi-Wan doesn't have any trauma there. Mace Windu doesn't have any trauma there. A lot of these so it works for a lot of people. It's just like we talk about, this is something that you talk about with priests who are required to be celibate. It's it's a similar thing. And there's yes, the only ones we ever hear about are the ones that have that where that's a problem.
Right.
But like
yeah.
But I would say probably 95% of priests know how to control themselves.
Right. And I guess that's sort of a good example, like as the real world example, like, yeah, maybe that might be true, but that means that the system itself there's a problem with. Even if like the fact that you're allowing that small percentage to do what they do means that the system is not it's not a good system. Right.
Right.
Even though that most people are not going to be like that. You know, most Jedi are probably not like covering up their mistakes by blaming it on other murdered Jedi and like you know like what we see happen in the show, but they're able to do that because of the way the system is set up. And like I think that senator is correct. That's not a good thing.
right. No, you're right. I just like specific, and I'm just zooming in specifically on that, you know, raising children, taking children away from their family at a young age and all that. And I just want to see it done. I want to see what it looks like when everything is fine, because at least some of the time everything is fine, you know? And I think,
or at least fine enough.
Pretty much like, every time that story has been told, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I imagine like a lot of times it is like if you're in a, it's like Qui-Gon says, if Anakin had been born on a Republic world, they would have identified him early, and it would not have been a question. They would have been like, oh, our kid's a Jedi. Well, here you go off and become a Jedi, because that's what happens. And it's a normal thing, and no one's traumatized by it because there's a cultural acceptance of this practice. So yeah, and
or are they traumatized every time? And it's actually horrible, but the kid isn't traumatized because it happens at such a young age, or what is that really looking like? Or is it because my
or is it trauma that they're never able to like, yeah. So go ahead.
Like my headcanon, a lot of my headcanon used to be with when it came to the old Jedi is that, you know, you're talking about a group that there's a total of like a few thousand in a universe of, I mean, Coruscant has a population of 1 trillion. And of that 1 trillion, there's 2,000 of them are on that planet are Jedi, and then you expand that to other planets. Probably don't have nearly, you know, that have a fraction of that, but even if they have like 1 billion population, you know, maybe one person from that planet ever has become a Jedi. So maybe it's like that. You know, either traumatic or it's like a big deal or whatever. I would like to know what that looks like. And again, like tell me how that looked like when Yoda did it. Tell me how that looked like when Mace did it. Tell me how that looked like when Obi-Wan. Because even we get Ahsoka as a little kid. We get Ahsoka as a little kid in that one Tales of the Jedi story, but we don't see her get taken. And, you know, what does that
I think we do.
look like?
Don't we see like baby Ahsoka and Plo Koon coming to pick her up? I think we do see that, yeah. I have this memory of there being a baby Ahsoka in the Tales of the Jedi.
There's definitely the first Tales of the Jedi episode is a baby Ahsoka story where she like she gets taken out on the hunt and then it doesn't go well and then she ends up like doing Force stuff with the thing, but I don't remember her getting taken.
Well, maybe I'm just imagining that and like that because that's sort of what's suggested by the story. But yeah, we don't really see.
I mean, eventually she obviously does, but I don't think it actually shows her leaving.
Yeah. So you mentioned like I want to see that with Yoda, and it makes me wonder like, do you think we will ever get a name for Yoda's species? Or we will find out what the story is of why there's only him and Yaddle apparently, and then presumably. So I mean, the assumption is like they're the only two, and that's where Grogu came from. Yeah. But
I think that we will learn that they are the Wills. I think
that has been my headcanon. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one that thinks that that the Guardian of the Wills, like the Temple of the Wills, it's like there's just a bunch of little Yodas in there.
That's I mean I don't know. I feel like there's enough fan canon or legends or whatever. I don't actually. It's not something I've delved super deep into, but I think that there's enough like kind of accepted lore behind that if they make it anything else, there would be some fan outrage that would be probably worse than and also it's just like, why not make the Wills? Like, it's just sort of, why not do it this way?
They've already introduced that word into canon where it was not before, like, right? Because that was the original title of Star Wars. For those who didn't know, it was called the Chronicle of the Wills, I think, or the something of the Wills. Yeah,
I just know it was the Adventures of Luke Starkiller.
There's that too, yeah.
But
Journal of the Wills, I think maybe. Anyway, I realize you said you had an out here in a few minutes. Do we want to talk about Star Wars cards at some point, or just
we should talk about Star Wars cards
proper? So there was a new virtual set that came out.
Let's just talk about set 23 a little bit. Probably before this episode gets posted, just because I post things slowly. You'll see the thing that I'm just about to record, which is a YouTube thing on Matt Manning's YouTube channel that is a set review. And I assume that you'll hear me talk about the set. But what are your why don't you talk a little bit and then I'll talk some too. What are your impressions of the set?
Well, I've printed it out, but I still need to do all the arts and crafts because I'm not sure when my next local is going to be. I'm the one who needs to schedule it, so that's probably something I should get on. But there's a lot of cool stuff. I'm interested to see how the new defensive shields configuration works. I have not been playing on Gemp recently for a variety. Mm-hmm. I've been busy in my personal life. So have you been playing on Gemp with the new shields?
So I played 7 games on last Monday night to get my 12 in for the OCS. And that was after. I will say, make sure that you do update your shields because they won't update automatically.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
So I played against a Mind What You Have Learned deck, and I did not have the new Test 3 shield, and it would have been. I mean, I did win. He was not in the best shape, and I don't know how. If Court sets up pretty well, I don't know how Mind What You Have Learned can really come back, because the way that mains decks can beat Court decks is to like come after them like from turn 1 or 2 before they kind of get set up.
You have to have kind of the perfect hand in order to do that, but if you're able to, that's certainly
right. I did draw deploy Jabba and then draw up, and my entire hand was characters on turn 2. But even so, like if they're giving you until turn 3, without coming after you, you can usually get a couple characters down at the audience chamber and have with backup in hand. I mean, it just depends, but yeah. I'll also say, I think my current favorite card of the set is Rebel Assault and the whatever the mirror is.
I think Rebel Assault, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. Which I just realized, are those named after the old school like LucasArts games?
I mean, I assume that Rebel Assault is, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rebel Assault is the when drawn for weapon or battle destiny +1 for each of your battlegrounds on table, limit +4, and it was already Destiny 3, so
So in most decks, it's going to
maxes
be a
out at
6 or a 7.
Yeah. And if you've deployed 4 battlegrounds, choose shuffle this card in your force pile, or during battle, add 2 to your total power. So I have floated 3 copies in my 0 hour deck, which might be a bit much. But first of all, my opponent always grabs it.
Yeah.
When I put
whenever you're a used 7 is always going to be grabber bait. And even though this is not always going to be a 7, yeah.
So that's something. But also it feels good in the deck. You can recycle it, and it's not even used. It's force piled.
Right.
Just,
yeah.
Now it sucks when you put it in your force pile and they grab it, but still. But then they've used up their grabber. I mean, obviously we have multiple grabbers and all that stuff, but and
now there's a wait. I'm trying to remember. There's also a card that will put an extra card on the grabber, or did they change that? I can't remember.
There is a card that does that, I believe. It just they changed the wording because it made it initially you could, the way it was worded initially, you could put it on your own grabber or your opponent's grabber or something like that.
Oh, gotcha.
Or something like that. No, that's what it was. You could put it on your opponent's grabber to like theoretically make it not work. The way it was worded initially, and they changed that wording. I can't find what card it was. But regardless, it seems like a cool set. There's just a lot of cards that will probably see play and will probably change the meta and everything, but not a lot that are like super flashy. Like,
I'm curious if the 2 effects that are basically 4 luck, but for 4 Laman and 3PO, I'm curious how much those are going to see play. Eyes in the Dark and whatever the dark side one is called.
Yeah, I'm playing the dark side one.
Eyes Can Deceive You.
Eyes Can Deceive You. Yeah, I'm playing it. I haven't been able to actually use it yet, but it is floating around in my court deck. Yeah. Also floating Young Fool in my court deck, but it's probably going to get cut. This is the one that says if you have 2 battlegrounds on table, an opponent does not activate up to 2 force, and then it's got some lost functionality, and it's a 6.
Cancel some cards.
I like, in general, I like all the cards that are saying like you're encouraged to play battlegrounds, and your opponent is going to get punished if they don't play battlegrounds. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even I don't know how much impact it's going to have. Either people will just continue to play them, and then these cards, will work, or people won't play them, and these cards won't see play. But
yeah, they feel like the kind of card that'll probably cycle in and out of the meta as needed. And yeah, it's good to have options like that.
I will say I'm a little
I didn't
underwhelmed.
Notice this checklist at the end. That's very handy. The defensive shields checklist for everything that you should have under your starting effect. That is including stuff like the Falcon Junkyard Garbage or Dewback, the things that the Dreadnought class heavy cruiser, or I believe you could. Am I wrong with this, or can you use the new Not with Insider Reach to also deploy the new Eli in Dreadnought? Right?
You cannot, because it doesn't have the it doesn't have the symbol. The
gotcha. Oh, you're right. Yeah. Okay. But it is Eli Vanto, so that card does pull it.
Okay. That makes sense. I don't like the art on the Eli Vanto and Dreadnought, but
it looks like the Battlestar Galactica to me.
Maybe that's more what Dreadnoughts are supposed to look like based on other stuff, but
are Dreadnoughts still canon? like they come from the Thrawn series, right? And obviously the lore box
So-
says they were introduced during the Clone Wars, but I don't think we saw any of those in any of the Clone Wars.
Well, the
that actually
Trade
got
Federation the Confederacy used them.
Well, oh, okay.
Yeah. Some of the shit. Yeah, at least that's my understanding. Is that some of the ships that the Trade Federation, because the Trade Federation also originated in the Thrawn trilogy.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Huh.
But I believe that the Confederacy used them, because I remember. Now I don't know if that was established in Clone Wars Legends continuity, like, you know, from like Clone Wars novels and comics. So I don't know if it's like canon, but it's at least the Thrawn trilogy is not the only place that they appear.
Gotcha.
In fact, we can find that out, and then we'll probably have to wrap up here shortly. How do you spell it? OUGHT?
AU? Let me see. I got it right here. Dread, NAUGHT. What does Wikipedia have to say?
Let's see. All right. Dread. And Wikipedia spells it OUGHT.
Oh, you want to know something funny? It's spelled NOUGHT on the Canons tab, but if you tab over to Legends, it is spelled the way that it is on the card.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So Eli Vanto, they should probably fix the spelling on that then.
Right, yeah.
And then you wouldn't have to specify that it needs to be a premium.
Because, like, yeah, no, that one doesn't have an O on it. Sorry, no.
But yeah, it says used by the Confederacy of Independent Systems.
But it also says that on the canon page, it also says that the Executor was a dreadnought. So,
wait, what?
Yeah. The subjugator class. We are getting way too in the weeds. No one is going to want to listen to this.
We're also referred to as Star Dreadnoughts.
Yeah.
Anyway. Which is from. It's from
the High Republic.
And also this obscure source, episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back.
What? What is that?
So it's probably because so this is like a and I don't talk about this a lot, and I talk about a lot of things, but the premise of a Star Destroyer, like you hear it and we all think it's like a ship that destroys stars. Yeah. But that's not what that means. What Star Destroyer means. A destroyer is a type of ship, like an aircraft carrier or a battleship or whatever.
It's a screening vessel, if I'm not mistaken. It's at least that's what it is in the video games I play.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like it's a kind of boat. Yeah. A kind of really big boat. There was a game that I played that was, I think it was called Battle Stations for PS1, where you could be like a battleship or an aircraft carrier or a destroyer, so it was like, so that's what I think, that's where Star Destroyer got its name, and so hence that makes sense why it was probably like the novelization of Empire Strikes Back, they called it a Star Dreadnought.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, all right. Well, we got to the bottom of that. Was there anything else we wanted to hit? Continentals is next weekend, right?
Yeah.
Are you going?
Yeah. No.
That's exciting.
Was not able. No? I was not able to get the days off work. Well, I probably could have gotten days off work if I fought for it, but it just wasn't in the budget. I did request the wrong days off work. So I do have Monday and Tuesday of this week off. And you may have noticed I'm recording from a different location. Again, I was at my parents' house last time. Now I am in Ashtabula, where we have where my parents have a sort of second home that used to be my grandparents' home. That's where we had our boot camp last year.
I was going to say, this is where boot camp was?
Yes, yeah. Yes. This is
when you guys burned drops.
Yes. When we burned a printed out slip of ROPS. Yes. And also, not the actual card, and also a copy of Brave Resistance, I believe. All right. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next time. Good luck. Have fun. No reverts. This podcast is a production of the Kendall Cast Podcast Network. You can support the show for just $2 a month at patreon.com/KendallCast or make a direct donation through the PayPal link at kendallcast.ninja. Every little bit helps.